Welcome to the Trader a Traitors podcast. I'm Matthew, a writer working in unscripted TV development and a Traitors superfan. This podcast is dedicated to mostly English-speaking versions of the TV phenomenon The Traitors. However, we've also recently covered The Traitors India and other strategy reality shows like Netflix's Million Dollar Secret and ITV's Genius Game. This season of the podcast is dedicated to the exciting new series of the Celebrity Traitors UK. Joining me each episode is a new co-host who will help me deep dive into the episodes, recap the main events, analyse the gameplay, and maybe even tell a sneaky little lie or two. Today I am going to be joined by a returning co-host and a Traitors expert. Let's meet them. My guest today is MaJiKer, musician, songwriter, producer, performer extraordinaire, Eurovision fanatic, revered Traitors connoisseur, and recent star of Coronation Street. MaJiKer, also known as Other Matthew, welcome back to the Trader. How are you, MaJiKer?
I'm very well, but people are going to be very confused. Like, hang on a minute, he was in Coronation Street. I might have missed that. Um, One of my songs was played in the background of the pub, The Rovers Return, and I only just
Yes.
found out about it. It was shown weeks ago, and this was like third-hand information. And I mean, talk about bucket list. Having your song played in the pub of the longest-running soap opera in the world is like,
Yeah.
as a musician, as a songwriter, you've got to take the wins where you get them. I'll
Yes.
take that one.
Absolutely. What a claim to fame. And you shared the little clip on your Instagram
Hmm.
story. People can find out how to follow you on Instagram a little later in the podcast. Now, Matthew, you wrapped up the entire previous season on The Traitors Ireland for me in
Hmm.
my absence. I know you really enjoyed that one. What did you think of the opening episode of Celebrity Traitors UK?
Oh, it was so good. And it's just so nice to feel the excitement in the UK. People are just buzzing, like, massive viewing figures, and everyone's talking about it literally in this kind of fairly, don't want to say hipster, let's say Earth Mother cafe that I go to, where it's like, they've got plants and stuff. And it's like, don't normally hear them chatting about TV. You can bet in the kitchen you could hear them going, yes, apparently he's a rugby player. It was like, okay, I know exactly, I know exactly what you're talking about. My friend hadn't actually seen it yet, shame on her. And so I was kind of like trying to shield her, saying, don't talk about anything, don't give us spoilers. You have to watch this live. This is event TV.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this very thing at work yesterday, a bit of debate about whether or not spoilers become your own fault at this point because you
Mm.
need to watch it live. I've heard people on a train talking about the traitors before in front of me, and I had a little giggle to myself. I really wanted to tap them on the shoulder and say, "Oh, you're talking about the traitors. Have you listened to this podcast?" I refrained. Now, Matthew, you're not only an expert because of your viewing history. You've watched lots of different international versions of The Traitors, but also because of our Traitors Live experience. We played the Traitors Live experience in London together. We did a whole podcast episode on it. And I actually have a surprise little voice note here that I've sort of not told you about, but it's very exciting. I'm going to play it for you right now.
Hi guys, so a while ago I won tickets to a charity event via Comic Relief that was hosted at the Traitors Live Experience by Claudia herself. She was absolutely amazing. She's wearing a cape with Faithful on the back with glittery letters and fingerless gloves, as you'd hope. She sort of explained the game and she treated it like it was the first round table selecting her traitors. There was a lot of the contestants from previous series there, like Linda, there was Diane, there was Paul, Harry, Maddie. Within our game, we got Wilf from Series 1, Molly from Series 2, and Jake and Alexander from Series 3. So we got to play the game with them, which was great fun. Unfortunately, Alexander got murdered early. He seemed really lovely. I was a faithful, as was my wife. But then at one point, I got a tap on the shoulder. I thought, oh God, I've been murdered. But then I was actually recruited by Wilf, who I was convinced was a traitor, and he got banished next. Managed to get through a couple more rounds, almost sweating under the stress of being a traitor. I survived a little bit, I recruited Jake as a traitor because I thought that he'd be amazing and no one would suspect him, and we could hopefully sort of float through the other rounds together. But after going to the turret, um, I was basically under suspicion, especially from Molly. She would not stop staring at me, and I was probably cracking under the pressure and looks a bit suspicious because it was me and my wife were the only couple sort of left. Um, and I did get banished, unfortunately, and Jake actually won the game as a traitor. It ended with him and Molly, and she just screamed, "I can't believe it! It's happened again." Got to chat to Mina, who won her game as a traitor. Got to chat to Harry, who'd been murdered, and everyone seemed really lovely, and it was an amazing experience.
So that was a message from James. Thank you so much, James, for sending that in. That's very exciting. I entered this very competition to win that chance, so I'm glad that we found out who really won and got a little message from them. It wasn't that I wish Claudia had been there when we were there.
Yes, I mean, I had a great time anyway, as you can
Yeah,
tell
we did.
from the podcast that we did about it. But that's very cool. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, so Traitors All Stars has happened. It's just it wasn't on TV.
Yes, exactly. And I feel that was sort of spoiler free. You know, if you've not seen other versions of the traitors, those names would have meant nothing to you, but all the more reason to go back now and watch previous series because you know, in episode 1 of the pod, Matthew, I was theorizing that I reckon a lot of people will be watching Celebrity Traitors who actually are first timers. People will be
Yeah.
coming to this, I think, who don't watch the show normally, but
Yeah.
they want to see their favorite stars. So
Mm. And
people will
even
be,
yeah, I even know someone who I won't name them, but I would say is a bit of a TV snob, and was like, no, no, not for me, not for me. And their partner is obsessed, and literally they sat down to watch it together. And the husband who was cynical about the traitors was saying, oh, I'll just make the fire or something, I'll take care of this, and actually ended up pottering around and being in the room for the entire episode, and then sitting down and actually watching the second episode and saying at the end of it, yes, that was quite good. I'm like, okay, why did you
excellent.
resist for 3 seasons, you idiot?
Yes, love to hear it. We have another listener message up top about episode 1. We've got some listener questions later on in the episode, but I'll put this one in here because it's about episode 1. This is from Maria on Instagram. Maria says, I really like the format of Celebrity Traitors so far, and I think it could be useful to use in other series as well. A bonus mission before traitor selection gave them a more realistic way to compare before and after, as opposed to just milling around the castle. And having so long before the first round table makes it more likely that someone can do something suspicious before then and give them actual evidence to bring to the round table. I usually cringe at that first round table because all they have to go off is prejudices. Even if they're wrong, at least the traitors have had multiple opportunities to slip up at that point, and even had to do a murder in plain sight. Of course, we still get a couple of votes of people thinking with their production hats on, but I guess that's impossible to stop. I like this thought of Maria's, and I think I agree. Yeah, I don't mind a banishment being postponed until episode 2. I'm quite happy to watch. I enjoyed the mission Shield actually. I like Shields where there's a purpose to it. And yeah, I like this idea that the traitors need time to mess up to give the faithful something to go on. Does this idea make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very obvious why they did it. It's because they've got this incredible cast and they just want to hold on to them a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
longer. So it's a bit like they've started doing this in other shows like Drag Race where they say it's so unfair that someone leaves in the first episode. So, oh, you all stay, or
yeah.
oh, have a chocolate bar, or whatever it is, or a lucky cow, or some twist. And it's like, oh, what a surprise. We haven't got rid of anyone in the first episode. I think they should just establish that as a thing. At the same time, it, I'm trying to pick my words very carefully here. With the civilian cast, you're like, I'm not really going to be crying because Yin went home. It's like, I mean,
Yeah,
she seems great, but it is an idea of like fodder a little bit. You got to just get through them.
yeah, true. And a colleague suggested they missed the excitement of, you know, someone being sent home immediately and oh, it's a big shock. So they felt the first episode was quite gentle and maybe that was a negative. So there's an interesting opposing viewpoint there.
Well, it's just the mood is so different, isn't it? Because they're celebrities.
Yeah,
Rather than,
yeah,
yeah.
of course. So we are going to explore episode 2 today. However, before we get there, we're going to initiate our podcast game, The Trader Traitor. Inspired by traitors' viewers' claims that they could easily spot the traitor's lies and deceptions, and that the faithful are fools, we are going to be playing our own game of secrecy and betrayal to experiment with that idea. The mission for MaJiKer and I from here on in is to try and tell a little lie to one another in this podcast. Our lie has to be a fabrication or a made up fact, big or small, about the traitors or anything else. For example, I could lie and say that at the mission today, if you look closely enough, you see Paloma Faith's fingers get trapped in the coffin lid as it closes. However, I couldn't lie and say that this episode really made me miss the Scottish weather. That would be a fake opinion. So we are looking for fake facts and false pieces of information rather than fake thoughts and feelings. Listeners, it is time to put your own skills to the test and see if anything lights up your radar. At the end of the episode, Matthew and I will test our traitor hunting abilities and see if we can successfully catch and banish the other player. Matthew, are you ready to betray me?
I'm ready. It's been a while. We're
It's been a
back.
while. It's back.
Mhm.
Our game begins now, and it is time to dive into episode 2 of the Celebrity Traitors Series 1. To recap some main events from episode 1 then, the traitors have been chosen. We have Jonathan, Kat, Alan, as well as Jonathan, who doesn't need it. Some other people have shields, the two Joes, Kate and Celia. Claire aroused suspicion by messing up in the main mission, and various other players' names, including Kate, are already being thrown around as suspects. The traitors have to then murder in plain sight by rubbing poison pollen on the face of a faithful before the night ends, and the traitors chose Alan to carry this out. We begin at this point then, it's still the evening, we're going to find out, is Alan going to pull it off? He's wandering around with his little cup of tea. He gets Paloma into the kitchen for a cuppa, but Ruth is there too. And then we cut away. And we suddenly cut to them leaving the kitchen. So we're wondering, has he done it? Has he pulled it off? Everybody gathers outside. It seemed like Jonathan managed to get everybody out for some fresh air. And we have a little moment of Alan just sort of saying to Jonathan, all done. Not particularly subtly. I wondered if someone else was like, what's all done? I wish someone had said, "What have you done?" And you don't look like, "Oh, I made a pot of tea," or like make up something. Um, I so it looks like it's going to be Paloma or Ruth, but
Mhm.
unless they're really deceiving us and it was some other person altogether. They all say goodnight, wish each other well, hope they're not murdered. Paloma has a final ominous line saying, "If I die tonight, goodbye. I adore you all." We head to the turret, and I sort of wonder, why do we need a turret tonight? But
Mm,
there's nothing to decide. I guess it's to give us an opportunity, maybe, for them to talk about what Alan did. They need that because yeah, I guess if they all just went to bed, the other two traitors don't know what Alan did, so they
yeah.
need to be prepared for breakfast. I guess.
That's the only downside of this format change, isn't it? It's like we've had a couple of turrets now which have not involved choosing who they're going to murder. That's
Yeah,
fine, shake it up, change it up. I do think there's an element of trying to eke as much value as they possibly can out of these celebrities. So they're like,
absolutely.
let's put these three people in a turret and see them having a conversation again.
Yeah. Jonathan asks Alan then who he picked, and we flash back to the kitchen. And I am going to be very smug, as I often am on the podcast, Matthew, and say my prediction was right. I predicted in episode 1 of the pod that Paloma would be the victim.
Mhm.
Uh, and we've got Alan saying in an interview, I've gone and murdered one of my best friends. And he managed to do exactly what I thought he would do. He says that she's got like a hair in her face. I did. Did you have any prediction? Were you surprised by this? How did you
Mm.
respond?
I was desperately trying to think how I would do it because it's so hard to touch someone's face. That's really the only way to do it is say, "Oh, love, you got a bit of, can I?" And then you just do that. And then
Yeah.
you immediately change the topic. So it just becomes like 3 seconds done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even still, it's like touching other people's faces is really tricky. I was trying to think, do you do something like it's like, oh, I've got this massaging my ears. Have you heard of this somatic thing where you do tapping, tap on your collarbone, and you can also tap under your eyes? Look, if you just
Yeah.
tap here, tap, 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 then it's done.
Yeah, I reckoned it might be Paloma because she and Alan are close and they both seem quite tactile and a bit frenetic, and it might not look out of place for Alan to just go, "Oh, there's something on you," and she just would think nothing of it. That was my theory. So uh, they have a bit of chat about that in the turret. Jonathan tells Alan, "You've got to toughen up." I just love how Jonathan is sort of trying to take charge of his little group of traitors. He really wants them to do well, and they agree that Alan did a good job and that he executed the plan perfectly, and off they go. In the morning, the jeeps arrive to the castle, and here we have our first breakfast. We're going to see who comes in what order. Nico, Kat, and Claire are first. Nico says he's ready to study everybody. Kate and Comedy Joe are next. By the way, I'm calling them Comedy Joe and Rugby Joe. Kate and Comedy Joe, we're reminded that they had shields, so they were kind of, could sleep well last night. And they speculate a little about who the murder victim might be with their portraits on the wall. Charlotte, Tom, Jonathan, Ruth, Alan are next. Of course, two traitors are in that little group there. Ruth is giving me Helena Bonham Carter, and this whole episode, it's very Tim Burton. I'm enjoying her aesthetic, and she makes this really funny comment here, something like, "Man, I'd be so gutted to be out of the traitor so early and not even have got a croissant out of it." So
Yeah,
she's having,
that was a good line. I like that. Not even get a croissant.
yeah, she's delivering some funny little lines in her mivs. I'm appreciating Ruth actually.
I mean, if the rumors are to be believed, then she's getting several tens of thousands of pounds out of it. So, buy your own
Yes,
croissant, Ruth.
true, true. We've got some little interviews from Alan and Jonathan talking about how this is their first breakfast as a traitor. They're really having to act like they don't know who's coming back. They have to wait. Oh, who's it going to be? And act like they're happy to be here. Oh, we didn't get. I mean, Jonathan had a shield, so I guess he doesn't have to pretend. Uh, Ruth again brings up Kate's overreaction. She's talking to Jonathan. Jonathan, meanwhile, is focusing on Nico as a possible suspicious character. Kate, meanwhile, is telling Kat and Nico they ought to focus on the people in the room rather than look just at who's coming through the door. Maybe look at the people, look at everybody's reactions, and that comes up later in the episode. Mark talks about that, how he wants to look at people's reactions to things rather than the thing that is happening,
Hmm.
which could be helpful or could completely lead them astray, as I think it does in this episode. Again, Claire is also remembering the over what she thinks are overreactions at the roundtable selection just yesterday. Um, it mostly centers around Kate. They think that she's very over the top. I just think it's Kate. I mean, she says
Yeah,
this herself later,
yeah.
but even my familiarity with Kate from TV makes me think I just think that's her personality. I think she is very expressive and quite exaggerated and amplified. I'm sort of maybe in that environment I would be suspicious of it, but it doesn't read as out of character from what I know from Kate Garraway.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're right, and we obviously know that she's not a traitor. But I
Hmm.
mean, come on. Did you watch Uncloaked at all?
I only watched the little moment of Paloma finding out the truth.
Okay, because they do say this on Uncloaked, and it is hilarious. It's like she's one of those people who says exactly what someone else has just said, but much louder and much slower. Someone goes, "Oh, there could have been a recruitment." She goes, "There could have been a recruitment." You're
She
like
does.
standing up. I mean, it is a bit too much. And I mean, there's two
Yes.
things here. First of all, calm your boots. Secondly, you're standing up and making such a fuss. What do you think is going to happen in this game? I
Yeah,
love that she's being herself, but by this point, I think the editors had made it so obvious there was going to be sauce on her for this because they just kept on. Everyone was talking about it.
yeah, yeah.
And to be fair, I would too, because I'd think, okay, well, Kate is Kate, but she is overplaying it and she's overcompensating. It was too
Hmm.
much. It was just too
Yeah,
much.
you're right. She maybe needs to realize that attention in this game is a bad thing. Paloma arrives in the next group. Of course, we are in the secret. We know that she's not going to be around for much longer. And she even says in her interview, thank goodness, I'm not the first one dead. Little does she
Mhm.
know. Cat's smiling at her across the table. Oh, I'm so happy you're here. It's great to see you. And the players await the final few. They think that either Nick or Lucy are goners today. And when they then all arrive, they're baffled. They don't know what's going on. They can't understand. Kate goes into Kate mode, right? But I also think Jonathan maybe overdoes it a little bit too. He's sort of going, oh, maybe there was a
Mm.
recruitment. And I do sort of think, Jonathan, you don't need to do this. Like let someone else do it.
But
Um
again, it's tricky, isn't it? Because Jonathan Moss is known for being very extra, being the one who
sure,
will shout
sure.
out the thing and getting all the attention. So you do want to be yourself, but yeah. I mean, Jonathan Moss is such a kind of gregarious, loud character that if he
Yeah,
was just sat there going, oh no, what's going on?" That would be weird. I think Alan's reaction was actually good for him, which is, "I'm so confused,"
yeah,
and
yeah.
and Jonathan's was probably right for him.
I guess so. And yeah, I'm thinking of Jonathan on The Masked Singer as a panelist. Yeah, his job is and he's the one who throws out the ridiculous, mad suggestions. He thinks every character is Mary Berry. I wish they had cast Mary Berry in this series of The Traitors, just so that
Mm.
Jonathan could throw her name out at round table.
Particularly
So
because, like me, he can't pronounce his R's very well. So it's Mary Berry.
yeah, absolutely, the perfect name. Claire's trainer is going off on all of this, of course, and Tom as well. Tom saying Kate's louder than usual. Something's not right.
Mm.
They they are all speculating. Alan is doing his best Meryl Streep. He makes a funny little aside there about that. Claudia arrives and plays. She's really. I talked about this in episode one. She's so. I love that she, even with the celebrities, she is not dropping the facade. She is absolutely in character. There's, she could have easily been a little bit more jokey with them, or like she probably knows all of them and has crossed paths with them at some point. But no, she is fully in Traitor's host mode. Everyone is here, present and correct. It appears that nobody has died, but appearances can be deceptive. The traitors did strike for the first time, and there's this horrible silence around the table. And she reveals that yesterday they murdered one of you in plain sight. Jonathan also does this sort of in plain sight. And Claudia tells them that by the end of today's mission, one of them will be dead, and mentions I think a little clue. I missed it. She says morning attire, MOUR, as opposed to morning attire. It's very subtle. A couple of the players pick up on it,
Hmm.
probably using what they know about the show to make that guess as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
I am in my morning attire. I've got a little black hat here as well, which I'm not going to wear because it's too small, and also it doesn't look very good on Zoom because the background is cutting it out. Anyway, so I am in my most
what?
glamorous black shirt I can possibly find. It's got kind of little things on it, but it's not as sophisticated as some of the celebrities' morning attire.
Yeah. What do you mean the background's cutting it out? You're in Ardross Castle. What
I am in
background?
Ardros Castle. It's just weird. I've got this kind of ghost thing where when I do the
Huh?
hat, it's like an invisibility
Oh,
hat. It's strange, isn't it? How
it's
mysterious.
Yeah, it's the castle's haunted. Clearly, that's all that there
That's what's
is.
going on. And
Uh,
if you're listening on a podcast, come and have a look on YouTube and also like and subscribe while you're there. There you go.
thank, thank you, MaJiKer. They're all, they're shook. They're wondering, oh, how did the traitors pull this off? And Charlotte mentions, it must have been something unusual enough to feel risky, which is a good line of thought
Mm.
to go down.
Yeah.
They spread off from the breakfast room. It's time to debrief before the mission. Rugby Joe's a bit confused about Claudia's clue. The other players are theorizing, was there an object handed over? Was it food? Was it a drink like we've maybe seen in other versions of the show? Alan
Mhm.
suggests Ruth brought out marshmallows to the fire. And then Lucy's like, no, that was my idea. That wasn't Ruth. But I like that Alan's, he's throwing some little things out there. He's getting into it. Paloma is sure nothing odd happened to her, except Nico hugged her goodbye. Could there be something in that? And, Stephen Fry, of course, points out to us it could be anything. There's kind of no point in theorizing like this. Kate speaks to Jonathan and says, very naively, I don't think anyone thinks I'm a traitor, do they? And
No,
Jonathan's like,
no.
well,
More specifically, she probably said, I don't think anybody thinks I'm a traitor, do they?
yeah, I did not put enough emphasis into that.
Were
And
they in the toilet? Because there was no cameras there. I
oh, I
think
don't
that I,
know.
I think they must have been in the toilet because otherwise, why were there no cameras?
I'm not sure.
We're not going to
Um,
have like an early days of Big Brother situation, are we? Where people are having their breakdowns
Whispering.
off
Yeah,
camera, and
yeah,
Big Brother is
perhaps.
not very impressed.
Jonathan here he could have sort of been like, no, nobody thinks you're a traitor, but he plays the good faithful and he says, actually, yeah, your name has come up. Like, there's no reason to lie if you don't need to, I guess. Tom is speaking to Charlotte. There's a moment they're sitting in these sort of armchairs, I think, and he's saying, you always think of a traitor as being a cunning killer, but maybe he's suggesting it could be someone quieter, like Nico or Ruth. Cue Nico appearing before them. And of course, Tom's playing a bit coy. He's just like, oh yeah, just having a chat. We're talking about anyone. We're talking about you. And Nico has a little chat with them before he heads off. Tom and Charlotte are left sus about him. Again,
Mhm.
like you said with Kate, the editing is pointing us in the direction that Nico is becoming a prime suspect and is
Hmm.
probably going to feature at Roundtable.
Yeah.
Tom also he talks a little bit about Kate as well
Mm.
here and her extreme nature.
I'm just
Celia, oh
disappointed that
yeah,
Tom has not yet done any knitting because he's famous for his knitting, and I
yes.
kind of like the idea that he could just be having these knitting needles behind his back and then whipping them out at various points. I recently found out that Tom Daly has knitted a recreation of a Gucci dress, and I wish he'd brought it with them for this funeral scene because then someone could have worn a knitted Gucci dress.
Yes, like a sort of posh spice throwback. Not that she would have worn a knitted dress, but Victoria Beckham's on my brain because she's got this new Netflix doc out, and I'm seeing lots of press. I want a Spice Girl in Celebrity Traitors cast. I would be amazed if Mel B is not up for it. Mel B's on every show going.
She's
Uh,
up for everything. Yeah.
but yes, maybe Tom will be. What they haven't had, I don't think, is the sort of VTs of them in the hotel room, their
Oh,
lodgings at night. If
yeah.
if they do that at some point, surely they're going to have Tom with his knitting needles out. But
In the
we
bath. Or
in
in
the
the
bath,
shower. Can one knit in the shower? If anybody can, Tom Daly can.
knitting his own towel to dry himself as he gets out.
Oh my God. That sounds like a Sisyphean task. You have to get in the shower and you're not allowed to leave until you've knitted yourself a towel.
Yeah, a never-ending task. We've got Celia outside with Jonathan, Comedy Joe, and Alan. She says that she doesn't trust Charlotte because she thinks Charlotte's very bright, very quick, and she gave up her shield too quickly in that mission. I thought some people might question that. And she says she doesn't even trust Comedy Joe, who's right here. She even turns to Alan, saying, Alan, you could be a great traitor. I mean, at that point, I think she's just throwing out examples of could be you. I don't think she really believes it.
Mm.
And Comedy Joe, does make this point that I mean, it could be either that there could be no theory behind this whatsoever. He says, ignore the people you think it could be and go the other way. Normally, it takes sort of half a season for people to start coming out with this stuff.
Mhm.
We need to look in the places we're not looking. I don't know if it ever really means it. I mean, they are kind of just taking stabs in the dark, but it was at least Comedy Joe is sort of, he's obviously clever. He's a comedian. He writes funny. sets. That's his whole thing is writing. He's smart.
He is funny. He is smart. But I did also recently find out that he got banned from his local park for chasing after a squirrel with a sausage roll. So, he is a liability. Um, the the
Oh,
thing
Joe.
is, the thing is with Joe is he needs to be very careful because he's right. I think he's right. We're looking at the loud people, the ones who are overreacting. Well, no
Yeah,
traitor if they were doing it all. That's the one thing you pay attention to. So even if
yeah,
Kate were a traitor, she'd probably think, "Oh, I better tone it down a bit because I'm a traitor."
yeah.
So he is right. You've got to look at the ones that are just going under the radar. But he is very foolish for saying so, particularly in front of
Mm,
another traitor or two.
yes, true. It is time for our mission then. The rain comes in, the rain stays with us this entire mission. The players end up drenched by the looks of it. Claudia says to them all, for poisoned Paloma, well, sorry, says to us all, not them. That would be a bit of a spoiler for them, wouldn't it? For us, for poisoned Paloma, the end of her time is drawing near. I think Poisoned Paloma should be Paloma Faith's new album title. It's
Hmm.
a lovely
Yep.
bit of alliteration there, or at least an alter ego for performing Poisoned Paloma. Everyone emerges in their funereal gear, much like you, Matthew.
Hmm.
It's yes, it's really it's epic. I mean, these are celebrities who have wonderful wardrobes, so I'm sort of looking at what everybody's chosen to wear. Claudia is here on a giant horse. There are coffins. She has a veil. It's just so ridiculous and brilliant at the same time.
Interestingly, apparently, I think this was on Uncloaked. I think Paloma said that they weren't told to bring their most extravagant funeral outfits. They were just told to pack something black. And this is
Mm.
what they all wore. They're like, something black, you say? Ah, I'll wear my knitted Gucci dress, shall I? They were like, they've got better wardrobes than us. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it does not surprise me. Uh, Alan, I'm saying that Alan is the star of the series. Obviously, he's just. You and I talked about it on our preview episode where we went through the cast
Mhm.
list, and you talked about how Alan just seems to be someone who has funny bones. He just
Mhm.
naturally can spit out a joke at any moment. He says, Joe Marler's not going to fit in one of those, is he? About the coffins, because Joe's this big built rugby player. Um, Apart from that, it is all very serious. I do just love that they are playing into all. They're
Mhm.
not. Maybe they're doing this off camera. I don't know. We don't see it, but I don't think they're all corpsing and sort of scoffing and going, "This is all a bit silly, isn't it?" Like they're really into the game,
Yeah.
which it doesn't surprise me. I think they're all here because they love the show. They want to play it. That's why they've signed up to this
Mm.
for a much smaller fee than most of them are probably used to.
Mm.
So off they go on their funeral procession. Jonathan's in his he's got his like sort of rock star Ozzy Osbourne shades on, which is just killing me, no pun intended. And it made me think I have a prop set of like big silly sunglasses. I mentioned this on the pod before. I used to work on The Masked Singer, I don't anymore. And I acquired a funny pair of sunglasses from as a little souvenir from the set. I'm now starting to wonder, are they Jonathan Ross's? I assumed they were like some sort of like one of the dancers things or something, but watching this made me think maybe it's Jonathan Ross's and I've like stolen one of his precious pieces. I don't know, but is he? Did he have a sort of like fur collar even on his coat or something? That
I thought it was wasn't it the whole like a furry coat? I thought the whole thing, or
oh,
like
maybe it was the whole thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
furry something
Um,
anyway.
I'm very impressed. I mean, Jonathan is also quite an extravagant dresser, and we know he loves his Halloween parties and all this sort of thing.
Mhm.
They actually have to be like pallbearers. They have to carry the coffins. I watched this episode with my partner, who just it takes a lot to make him laugh, and every few seconds I just heard him going, he's just laughing at how nuts it all is, and in a really positive way. He wasn't laughing at it; he was laughing with it, really enjoying it. We're back at the graveyard for episode one, and Claudia explains the mission. They have to solve a series of clues that will whittle down the players to a final three. And She explains that the traitors chose the other two who lie down beside the real victim, which is I like that. That's a really interesting way of playing it. I like that the traitors had to manipulate things a little bit. It gives everybody against something to theorize about, something to go off of. Why would they pick this person and so on? It's a mission where there is also money up for grabs though, based on how well they can answer the clues. And if they need to ask for additional clues, they'll pay a penalty of £500. This is uh this is not a spoil. This is look, we've seen some very similar missions to this in some other seasons. Normally they do sort of they move around, they travel, they walk through the grounds of the house. Here it's quite stationary. They just keep it in one place and all of the clues are sung to them by a choir. Clue one is you chased your goals with all your might until you kicked the bucket out of sight. They start to wonder, is it an actor who's died on screen? Is that what it means by kick the bucket? They can't narrow it down. They ask for a second clue and a
I
ballot
mean, I
box.
at this point I start to wonder who who is this choir and why are they singing in what we call musicians in a bitonal fashion where some are singing in one key and others are singing in another key. And I'm not talking about a harmony line, people. I'm talking about as a choir lead, you have to give the notes. You have to give the notes, guys. La da 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 da. You can't just start singing and everyone starts singing in their own key. And I know that it wasn't me being just really mean here because the second one, they sang beautifully in tune and in harmony. The first one and the third one, I was like, oh my goodness me. Is this the best mini gospel choir you could find in the Scottish Highlands?
Yeah, is bitonal a nice way of saying horribly out of tune? It's-
Exactly, exactly. There's another way, which is microtonal, which is what you spoke about, Victoria Beckham. I always say she's many things. She's also a master of microtonal singing. She very consciously explores the realm between the semitones.
Yes, the range between the notes. How dare you? Take it back. She's a musical genius, and I won't have any other word about it. Uh, I thought the clue was leading us to, to Rugby Joe. The chased your goals, kicked, and I think it probably was designed to maybe throw them off that way a bit. But they
Mm,
asked for their second clue anyway. A literal ballot box is brought out by Claudia, and they realise that it's Nico. They say that he ran for London mayor as a kind of publicity stunt. I think he's done it in other elections too. It's not just the London mayoral one.
yeah.
Always as a sort of YouTube joke type thing. And he enters the first coffin, so he has to get in and lie down, and they discover that they're correct. Claudia reveals they've won £2,500. And we get a flashback to the traitors choosing him and telling us why. They basically want to frame him. They think he's got some sus on him already. Let's make it look like he's a traitor who put himself in the coffin. Which,
Mhm.
on one hand, why would a traitor do that? On the other hand, these players fall for it. So it works really well.
Yeah.
Clue two, which apparently you've noticed was sung in tune this time. You filled the airways with laughter and jest, completed your task, now time to rest. They make a connection to maybe Taskmaster and podcast radio. They're torn between Lucy, Nick. Has anyone else been on Taskmaster? They need a second clue. An Apollo 11 rocket appears, and they all decide it's Nick. And I thought, oh yeah, they must be right because I think because he was in a sitcom with David Schwimmer that was t set in like NASA or something. It was something to do with space scientists,
Mm.
astrophysics, something like that. And I didn't watch it. I saw little clips of it. So I think that's why they came to that conclusion. Maybe I'm wrong. And so Nick gets in the coffin, but this time, the fact that Claudia says, "Before I reveal whether you're right, I'll bring out the third clue," kind
Yeah.
of makes you realize, oh, she's doing that because they've got it wrong. It's the hull of a boat in a
Yeah.
reef, and they realize it's Lucy because she's, like you pointed out on our other episode, she's from Hull,
Yeah.
and she played at the Apollo. That was the
Mm.
Apollo
I
link.
Okay, so at this point, I got really annoyed. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to Google what has Apollo 11 got to do with Nick Mohammed? And Google was like, not much really. And then I was like, okay, just be patient, Matthew, you're gonna get there. And then when it was like, played the Apollo the Hammersmith Apollo, I was like,
Hmm.
oh, the Apollo. I was a little bit slow to
It
get there.
it might have been, maybe I'm wrong about the sitcom thing. Maybe it was also that, but I think he was in a sciencey, spacey TV
She
show.
said, I think one of her maybe comedy tours or TV shows was called Space Mam with an M.
Ah,
Like she's a mam, but she's like Space Mam.
okay, okay.
What is so interesting about Lucy Beaumont, and I love the fact they brought out the Hull because she has her accent, international listeners, is Hull, like times 1,000. She's the most Hull person, and it's so Hull. What is interesting is that I just found out apparently she was born in Cornwall in Truro,
Oh,
and
oh
for some
wow.
reason I find this hilarious when someone has an incredibly strong regional accent from literally the other end of the country. She was like,
Yeah.
"Nah, I was born in Truro." It's like,
I love her accent. It's that alone lends so much to her comedy. It's great.
yeah,
I just love listening to her speak.
I
Her
think,
delivery
yeah, she's
is great.
100%. She's going to be one of the breakout stars of the show. I hope she stays in longer. She's
Yeah.
amazing. I love her.
Yes. We get a flashback to the traitors deciding why they picked Lucy, and they thought maybe we should just pick someone who's a bit quiet. And perhaps they say it's not totally clear. They say something about, oh, it'll raise the idea that she's going under the radar. I wondered if did they mean that might make her look traitorous because she's a quiet player and people will look oddly on that, or are they just like, let's just pick something that nobody's really thinking about to throw them off? I wasn't sure what the theory behind it was. Lucy then
Mm.
takes Nick's place in the coffin, and we get some MIV, and listeners, when I say MIV, I mean MIV, master interview. We've got when the players are in the armchairs and what looks like a library in the castle, and they're talking right to the camera. And we've got bits of Alan and Jonathan saying, they don't want to intervene with the task. Even if the answer's wrong, they're not going to draw attention to themselves by correcting everyone. They're just going to let it play out. Clue three is you found your voice amidst the big smoke. Your story is done, but your words still spoke. They wonder, is it Charlotte? Because of voice, she's a singer. They ask for a second clue. And a black and white stripy tie comes out. They immediately think it's a St. Trinian's connection, the film. But Paloma and Stephen and Celia were all in that film. Very clever of whoever was in charge of the clues
Mhm.
here. Or maybe it's Newcastle related. David tells us he was born in Newcastle. Again, accents. You would never guess that. David doesn't seem to have a Geordie accent.
No.
And they need a third clue. Um, I think they need a third clue. Yes, they do. Another wreath comes out and it's got tiny little hearts with plasters or band-aids for American listeners across them. And Alan, he's doing his best. He's go, oh, has anyone got a song called Plaster on the Heart? Um, Charlotte,
Funny you
yes,
should
my
say that.
second album was called Plaster on the Heart.
Exactly. But hey, tissues and issues. Where are you going to go from there?
Oh God, I would love if
She's
that had been the answer.
she just basically all her songs. She writes all her songs in Boots, the chemist, and she's like, right, I've done the issue, I've done the tissues. Let's move to
Yeah.
the plasters. Her third, I'm very excited about her new album. It's called "Soak Me in Radox." It's a relaxing. It's like a it's like a spa album where she's reconnecting with the earth.
I can I can sort of almost believe that because yeah, she is very sort of Earth Mother now, isn't she? Very ethereal.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's on the way. If she get maybe Redox will sponsor her or Boots. Uh, Tom eventually points out, "Oh, Paloma, only love can hurt like this." The song, and they conclude it probably is Paloma. She gets in the coffin. Alan, drenched, is trying to reassure her. Don't worry, it might not be you. Claudia reveals that now they have banked £4,500, but says there is one last question to answer, and it's a big one. As a group, they have to decide which one of the three was murdered, and if they guess correctly, she'll add an extra 4,000 to the prize fund. Uh, Here again, I made a little note to myself. Kate just needs to realize how vocal she is all the time. Like every time anything happens, she's going, oh, oh, how awful. Oh, oh no, not the coffee. Like, it's just too much. Very
Was
funny
that
to
when she
watch, but
was that when we had the start of Flabbergast Gate?
Flabbergast Gate is on the way. Yes, very
Okay,
shortly.
okay.
Yes.
She is flabbergasted, but she has not yet vocalized that.
No, not yet. They decide to just like put it to a vote. Ruth takes charge, and Alan knows he's well, he can't out himself. He can't vote for Paloma because he knows he's going to just pretend. And actually, Paloma only gets one vote, and it's Charlotte. She thinks it might be her. Most of them vote for Lucy,
Mhm.
and we get a moment of Paloma going, I think it's me now," and they lock in Lucy,
Paloma, are you
but
joining us on the call? That's lovely
what?
of you
No.
to stop. Oh,
Shh, Paloma. Go back to your
just
coffin.
incredible,
They
incredible impression.
they lock in Lucy. Claudia walks along the coffin. She's teasing it out, reaches Paloma, slams it shut. They're horrified. Cue Kate. This is flabbergasting. Stephen Fry looks, he's shook. He's like, and Alan looks like really. I mean, I think he's gutted because he feels very guilty, and his best
Yeah.
pal's not going to be around anymore. And Paloma is literally carried off by some people. She's buried, it looks like she's sort of placed in one of the graves. And again, Jonathan may be doing a bit too much. Goodbye, sweet Paloma. And we've got Paloma in her miv. She's gutted. She's actually almost crying. She's a bit upset to be going. And Claudia asks for, a few words from anyone. Jonathan
Mm.
volunteers Alan. He's like, Alan, you were close to Paloma. I'm like, geez, Jonathan. So I think Alan's thrown a bit and then does a sort of, oh, it's just that she was, she's not actually dead. But he's saying she was so full of life and I just wish she didn't have to leave the game this way. And
Yeah.
Jonathan, and we will avenge her. At this point, I thought, Jonathan, you need to stop now. Like, come on.
Yeah.
We,
Um, what's interesting here is that because Paloma's obviously been murdered, I haven't seen her acting in anything actually, but
mm,
apparently she was in a show called Pennyworth. Have you heard of that one? It's the Batman prequel.
I don't think
So,
so.
so I think
Oh,
it's
no,
about
no, no. Yes,
uh,
yes, yes.
the
I
butler
do.
that like the Batman's butler.
Yeah.
And apparently in that she was absolutely phenomenal and she played a murdering sociopath. So
Oh.
I kind of think, if you're going to get plaudits for being famous for murdering people, then it's fitting that you're the first one murdered in this game.
Yeah. I've seen her pop up in various things, but when someone asks me what she'd been in, my mind goes blank and I can't remember.
Mm.
We were back in the Jeeps going to the castle. We've on one hand we've got Alan talking about being close to Paloma, he's gutted she's gone. Meanwhile, in another Jeep, Claire points out, it would be the last thing anyone would suspect if Alan actually was the traitor who did this. And there's a moment of Kat being fully on board with that. She's like, "Oh yeah, it could be." I'm really based on Kat's little line at the end of episode one or whatever it was. She is willing to throw her traitors under the bus, I reckon. Kate is on Tamika's trader. Tamika's on Mark's trader. Kate and Claire are on a few people's trader. So we've got the names floating about already. There is a little bit of time in the castle before round table, so we've got Nico realizing he has probably been framed by the traitors. That's why he got put in the coffin. He's right. Paloma's portrait already has its red cross on it. Claire is still questioning Alan. Maybe he's the guilty party because it's so unlikely. We've got others in the kitchen talking about how likely is it that Lucy or Nico are traitors? Did they put themselves there? Comedy Joe reckons that is very unlikely the traitors would actually do this to themselves. And Joe tells us in confessional in Miv that he doesn't think it's Nico. And he says he's looking at Tom. He thinks that Tom is sweetness and light. And he sort of mimes, pulling the trigger on a shotgun. He's like, imagine him callously shooting people down. He's like, I'd watch that. And Kat's talking to Charlotte, Tom, and Alan. Nico comes up in the conversation. Kat, I think, does a clever job here, actually. She says, no, I don't think he is a traitor. And I'm saying that's clever because it would be so easy for Kat, a traitor, to just to every suggestion go, yeah, yeah, it's him, yeah, it's her. But actually, it's quite wise to be judicious and sometimes say, no, I don't think it is, because you've then got the benefit of maybe Nico gets banished and she can say, I told you I didn't think it was him, and
Mm,
that makes you look quite wise and un-traitor-like, I suppose.
yeah.
Uh, Instead, she talks about watching people with exaggerated reactions. Back to Kate again, and Tom obviously agrees with this. By the way, they're in like the sort of billiard room at this point. Why is Tom's shirt unbuttoned down to like, halfway down his torso? I mean,
Well,
Tom, he's a very fit man. He's a diver. Obviously, very objectively attractive. But Tom, you're in Scotland. It's cold. It should be pouring. Button up your shirt, Tom. That was my main thought here. Um,
Paloma, I think it was on Uncloaked. Paloma said, "This is the amount of buttons he has undone. It's giving like American Psycho vibes."
yeah, it is. Yeah, Christian Bale. Yeah, maybe that's not a good look actually. People might think that's quite sus.
Mm.
Tom then brings up Flabbergast He says, "Who says flabbergasted?" And Alan's like, "Well, you can't just say someone's a traitor because they have a better vocabulary than you, Tom." Um, and they chat a little bit more about this use of language and the, amplified nature of Kate. And it's time for a round table. Going in, we've got some mivs. Kate says her heart's in her mouth. Nico knows people are coming for him. Tom's telling us there's so little to go on. He's gonna just have to go with what he's noticed and hope no one comes for him. And Celia, who I love, says this really funny thing. Now, this might be taken out of context. Maybe she says this like 5 episodes later and they've slotted it in here, but she goes, "We know how ruthless they are, these dastardly traitors." Firstly, dastardly is just peak Celia. And she says, "They're clever." And it makes me laugh because I think they've not really done much yet. Like, how do you know they're clever? People buy into the idea of a traitor so much. They are so willing to say, "Oh, they're manipulating this game. They're so smart. They fooled us." And I think they've not really had to do much. You're doing the work for them. So Celia's maybe giving the traitors a little bit too much credit at this point.
Yeah, I think she's doing a bit of improv here, which I appreciate because she hasn't got a script, so she's got to go. She's got to just improvise it, and she's like, "Oh yes, the traitors," and she's
Yes.
doing a little riff on how dastardly they are.
Yes, very true. I suggested in episode 1 of the podcast, Matthew, that Celia, if Claudia ever has a sick day, I think Celia would be a great cover,
Mm,
substitute Claudia for an episode or two. I think she could pull that off very well. Maybe some
yeah.
other spin-off, some other iteration. Get Celia Imrie in there to play the part.
Have you
Claude,
noticed, total sidebar, but have you noticed that there's in the English speaking world, I think there's only one male host left of the traitors.
yeah, yeah, I have noticed this because in the last week or two, we've had new hosts announced for Traitors New Zealand and rebooted Traitors Australia, both
Mm,
women. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a pattern they're very deliberately following to have a female
mm,
host. And so I guess we've got Alan Cumming doing the US one, and even Alan is very flamboyant and sort of has
yeah.
traditionally feminine traits. But yeah, I have noticed this and I love it. I think it's a great choice. But it is
Well,
interesting.
yeah, you need to watch some international versions. We need to watch the French one where there's crazy clown guy, Eric Antoine,
Oh
who's like
yeah.
constantly just going, literally, like he literally does that all the time. And the Swedish one with Gaggo, and I think I've told
Oh.
you before, he's like a kind of I don't know where he's from in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, but Balkan like drug lord. He's got this kind of
Mm.
like yeah, dear dogs for border rundet. I've said that wrong. Anyway, it's time for the round table, and he's like super gruff. So yeah,
Yeah.
but those guys are just the only ones clinging on. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
loving it, and Claudia opened a door. How many doors
Yes.
has he opened?
Absolutely. And it is interesting to see these different the variations around the countries and
Mm.
a reason alone to have a little look at some international versions, I reckon. Claudia is here then and tells us the prize fund is £19,500 and says one of the skills you need to be good at this game is to know when someone is lying to you. You're famous. People lie to you all the time. And gives them some examples. I love that show. It's a great jacket. I listened to that particular podcast twice. It's great. They're all laughing along. I'm laughing along, and she tells them lies. The discussion opens and Stephen begins, which I'm sort of not surprised at. He reminds everyone basically that it's not personal and like we don't have much to go on. We're just gonna have to write a name. And in Stephen style, quotes Arthur Conan Doyle. He says Sherlock said it was a cardinal error to theorize without data. I looked this up, Matthew. Stephen is actually misquoting a little. The real quote is, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data." He's paraphrasing a little. I'll let him away with it.
Hmm.
Maybe he'll go to the library later and find a copy of Sherlock Holmes and check that out. Kate speaks. She says, "Look, I know my name's cropped up. Why? Can anyone tell me more about these conversations?" And Kat steps up and says, "Yeah, I said again, which I think is wise, not to fully say nothing at the table." So Kat's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I said your name. I wondered if it's just your large response to things like Paloma's coffin being closed." And here Kate does her, "I'm just a massive ham, so my reactions are always over the top about everything." And Claire adds to this. She's like, "Yeah, Kate, you know, when traitors were selected and Claudia mentioned the faithfuls, you were nodding too vigorously." And Ruth brings up the fact that Kate didn't offer up her shield on the mission. And Kate first of all says, I I was in a blur that mission. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even notice Charlotte giving her shield. And she does cleverly point out, but wait a minute, doesn't that make me more of a faithful that I didn't want to give up my shield? That doesn't,
Hmm.
which is a fair defense, I think. Stephen speaks up next and says, "Well, shouldn't we also consider who was likely to have told Claudia they'd want to be a traitor? Like, you know, they're not going to pick people who didn't want to do it." And I thought that he was going to go round everyone and say, "Can you tell us what you told Claudia or production? Who said they wanted to be a traitor?" And of course, anyone could just lie at that point, you know, and say, "Oh, I know, I said I wanted to be a faithful." But he shines a light on maybe that conversation did happen, but we cut to him turning on Nico and saying, you know, "Nico, it seems like you'd be a very likely person for this. You do your pranks online and so on." And Nico is happy to defend himself. He says, "Right, I knew this was coming. I've been set up by the traitors with the funeral task. Does anyone have any explanation? Why would I do this as a traitor?" And there's not a lot of comeback on that, except Charlotte says, "Well, look, there are probably double and triple bluffs here. Like you could be you could be a traitor who did this to then say, why would it be a traitor who did this, but actually you are a traitor who did this." And she also says that Nico had an impeccable poker face at traitor selection. She was very surprised at how stoic he was. Maybe he was holding back. Jonathan joins in here. He's saying, "Yeah, Nico, I've noticed your behavior's changed a little." And Nico just sort of returns to, why would I give myself this much heat? Why would I put myself in this position? Mark speaks up next and moves on to Tamika and reiterates what he said in the first episode. He thinks her demeanor's changed, she's become withdrawn and jittery, and he thinks that at the funeral mission he watched her reactions and something wasn't quite right there. And Tamika's very surprised by this, I think. She's saying, "Well, I thought Lucy was going to be murdered. I was shocked when Claudia shut the lid on Paloma. I really was surprised." And she sort of flips it back on Mark, and she's like, "Well, I saw you watching me. I noticed you noticing everyone else." And she then swings back to Kate and saying, "Yeah, Kate, actually, I also kind of thought it was you." Stephen then moves on and says, "Well, maybe we should think about why Paloma. If we were traitors, what would inspire us to choose her? Is it because she's a big character?" David's saying, "No, I would have done what Nico said, decide who had heat on them, shine a spotlight on that person." I think these are all quite sort of logical routes to go down. I think, you know, Stephen is trying to do let's not focus too much on body language. Let's think. as logically as we can about the choices that have been made. So,
Hmm.
and obviously David seems to be going along with that. He's very academic, very logical. Ruth comes to Alan and says, "Yeah, you were closest to Paloma. Did she suspect anyone? Did she throw any names out there?" And Alan really goes for this. I think I'm, making this up. I think this is a bit of a fabrication. He says that she said, "If I die, there's two names," but he didn't get the chance to get them out of her because there wasn't any time. Like it was if it was this happened during the mission or something. I'm assuming this is all fake. Did Paloma say any such thing to Alan?
We didn't see that, but I do think
Yeah.
it's a slightly odd thing for him to have made up. Um, yeah, because I don't see what it does to say, oh, there were two names, but oh, it's annoying because I didn't get them. So I think
Yeah.
it probably
Okay.
did happen. That's my
Okay.
guess.
Mm.
But
I thought,
off camera maybe.
yeah. What I thought he was going to say was, I thought he was going to bring their joke last night when they looked at Claire and Celia at the bar and said, "Oh, look at those two
Mm,
traitors." I thought he was going to go for that, but maybe like yeah, maybe you're right. She really did say this later, and so he's drawing on that because it was true. Comedy Joe steps in. He says, I don't think it's Nico. Nico has also been too worried about being murdered, and I believe how worried he was." And then brings up Tom. Tom's on his radar purely because if Comedy Joe is like, if I was controlling this game and I was picking people, I would have picked Tom. He'd be so unsuspected. And Nico has one little last plea before Claudia ends the discussion and tells them it's time to vote. We begin with Ruth, meaning that I did write this down later. We're going to end with Nick. Nick is sitting beside Ruth. Ruth's vote is for Kate. Tamika also votes for Kate. Alan's next and votes for Nico and says, "I've got to go for my friend who I lost today." Again, I think Alan, she's not dead. And Mark is next and votes for Tamika, which is not a surprise. He singled her out. Nico goes for Tom. I wonder if Nico should have gone for Kate. Did, just sort of numerically, wouldn't he
yeah.
have had a better chance of surviving? I wonder if
Yeah.
Nico thought more people were going to go for Tom. Maybe they still are. Um, Kate votes for Tamiko. I'm looking at Tamika and Nico. It's the if they become a couple, that'll be the name. Tamiko, Tamika, and says, "I was convinced by Nico that it wasn't Nico," which is fine. But I thought, well, why was Tamika your second choice? I'm not quite sure. Maybe she said more than that and they cut it out. Rugby Joe goes for Nico, and Lucy, who's really struggling with this, I think genuinely, says and we saw her rubbing out names, and she says, "I've written Nico, but I don't really think it's you." Kat then goes for Kate, which means we've got a bit of a tie now. Kate has three votes, Nico has three, Tamika has two, and Tom has one. Claudia's telling us this could go any way. Stephen, who do you believe is a traitor, and why? And on Stephen looking very nervous and worried and anxious, we cut to the credits. Firstly, I know some people get really annoyed by these cliffhangers and wish that we would just find out who's banished. And I famously on the podcast always say, happy with the cliffhanger. I want all the speculation for the next 6 days. So are you annoyed that we didn't find out the result of the roundtable here?
No, I mean, I could see, I was watching it live, which is unusual. So I could see that we were approaching the 10 o'clock news. And so,
Okay.
we were definitely going to run out of time. Look, I think we know what's going to happen in terms of the way the vote's going to go, by which I mean there's going to be a landslide because why on earth would they
Hmm.
cut it off? Are they even halfway through the votes? Hardly.
We've still got 9 people left to
Yeah, so they're
vote.
less than halfway through the votes. And so there's clearly going to be a landslide. So then the question becomes who's the landslide for? The way it's been
Hmm.
edited, it looks like Kate. So, um,
Oh,
oh, did you have a
interesting.
different
I
opinion?
think it. I think it's going to be Nico.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, you're right. Stephen shouldn't be a deciding vote at this point. But you're
Yeah.
right. I think they're probably just going to be a slew of votes for one person, so it wouldn't have been as exciting to end the cliffhanger any later than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, last episode, before we even got to the round table, my prediction for the first banishment was Kate. I'm gonna switch it to Nico. Yeah, I just wonder if Stephen he he seemed to be going for Nico because he thought he would be a good
Mm.
choice by production, and he seems to be struggling with that. I wonder if Kate is just gonna get away with the I'm just a ham and that's just me, and people go, right, okay, fine, maybe. I'm gonna go with Nico. That's my prediction. But you reckon, are you sticking with Kate?
I mean, it could go either way, but as I say, whichever happens, it's got to be a landslide because otherwise it doesn't make any sense unless they're doing some kind of weird double bluff and then we come back and it's a tie and then there's all this drama at the start of the next episode.
Yeah,
But they would have included that in this episode,
I
surely.
think so. Jumping ahead further, any predictions about who the traitors might target next for a murder? Anyone that makes sense to
Ooh.
you at this point? Someone, are they going to go for someone who's really clever and they just want to get them out? Are they going to go for a shock
Mm.
tactic, get rid of a big character? Are they going to go for a really quiet person that no one's going to think anything of?
Yeah, there was a really interesting conversation actually on the first episode of Uncloaked. Obviously, they didn't have a murdered player or a banished player, but they
Hmm.
had three traitors, one from each of the UK civilian seasons.
Yeah.
They had Mina, Wilf, and Harry. And Harry really showed why he made a good traitor um, because he was just explaining, he was just going through everything he was saying, right, so you've got to keep certain characters on side, but this, not those. And if that one do, you've got to keep people that are on side, but you can turn them and they might suspect you, but not enough. I was like, oh my goodness, this is like 4D chess. The guy's a genius. Like it
Yeah.
was so smart, everything he was coming out with. I've watched a lot of this show, and even I was like, oh, he really, really knows how to play this game. I think it's that strategy because he comes from like a military background, so I think this like
Yeah.
rigor and strategy. So with that in mind, there are ways you can go this early. You can either just get rid of a random one. So I think Wilf was saying, "Oh, we just tried to get rid of random people with no rhyme or reason, so that every breakfast people were totally disoriented. They were might even have been flabbergasted by the dastardly traitors." Um, so yeah, that's one way, but I don't think in the end really that quite worked. I think
Hmm.
you need to give some kind of message to the faithful, but again, what is that message? But I think
Yes.
the most important thing is to think who you want to move forward with and who could be a risk. That doesn't mean they're the most vocal, doesn't mean they're the most quiet, but you need to think who could you get on side. You've got to be thinking for like the end game. Because if you get rid of them now, they can't be at the end game, you know? You've got to
Yeah.
think 50 steps ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to call it here. We've not seen them discuss anything. I wonder if they will go for someone who's showing signs of being too clever, maybe Comedy
Mm.
Joe, although Comedy Joe's handy because he suspects Tom, so is it good to keep him around and get him on Tom even further? Maybe Stephen. Maybe they just say Stephen Fry's being really logical at this round table. Let's just get rid of him. So I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen goes. We shall see in episode 3 next week. We have a couple of listener thoughts, listener questions. I'm going to jump to. We've got Ezzy's Obsessions. Ezzy's Obsessions on Spotify, who simply says, I just watched the first and second episode. I had to yell at my school friend because he almost told me spoilers. Alan Carr makes me laugh so much. I'm not sure whether I prefer normal traitors or this one. Which one do you prefer? I I guess it's too early for me to say. Generally, I don't enjoy the celebrity ones so much, like US traitors with their reality stars. I prefer unknown civilians, normies. But I'm loving this series too, so I think I can answer that question better later on, probably. Any response to that, Matthew? Do you like celebrity versions? Do we like normal versions?
Yeah, the same as you. Definitely prefer the civilian versions. Um, the only so I'm absolutely loving this series. Let's be clear, we've only had two episodes, and it's so entertaining. The only thing I would say is that I wonder. I'm going to be very curious to hear from your listeners what people are getting out of it if they don't know these people, because, like we said in our intro episode, I feel like I know all of these people apart from three.
Hmm.
So like Nico, Ruth, and then I was aware of Kat Burns, but I don't think I'd ever seen more than a couple of minutes of interview with her. But these other people are so familiar, so familiar. So when someone and just think about how different that is these early stages, where someone goes, "Oh, Kate's a bit extra," I'm like, "Oh, she is, isn't she?" Because we've seen her on TV for like 30 years, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it I'm just taking it for what it is. I'm like saying this is very different, and being British and knowing these people by heart is very different. And I'm the next step's going to be interesting is to see if their character gets broken down a little bit. And
yeah,
like you said, I'm glad that they are playing it seriously. They seem to be. They're not. They're making lots of jokes, but they seem to be actually properly playing the game.
yeah,
So I'm looking forward to more of their yeah, they're kind of unexpected character traits coming through. And one last thought on that. I must say, Stephen Fry always presents as such a confident, articulate, erudite man. In this context, sometimes I thought he looked like a lost little boy. I don't know if you picked up on that
yeah.
as well. Walking around, not quite knowing, being modest, self-effacing. You know, like
Mhm.
when he spoke to Nico and said, "Oh, I've just got a sticky memory." He seems very, like, a little bit nervous, and I was like, "Okay, are we getting
Yeah,
through the celebrity armor here?"
yes, absolutely. We have got a final voice memo. This is from MaJiKer or Angus. We now know his real name. MaJiKer is a long-time listener, often gets involved in the YouTube discussions. Here we go.
Hello, Matthew. This is Zypker, and I'm here with a theory this time. After looking at all the faithful in the game, I actually think Joe Wilkinson is the faithful with the best chance of winning, surprisingly, as I think he actually has the optimal game plan for a faithful to win. Because he openly talks about how bad he is at the game, the traders will likely want to keep him around until the end game so that they can have a player in the game that they can manipulate to their side and keep with them for voting in the finals. Additionally, someone who's constantly wrong with their suspicions and constantly being tricked is likely to not be banished. He may be like constantly incorrect with identifying traders, but even in the end game, he doesn't actually have to identify who in the end game is a traitor. He just needs to identify at least one person as a faithful and go to the end of the game with them. Now, I don't think this is like some genius master plan by Joe Wilkinson. I think most of it is just a byproduct of his self-deprecating personality. But I do actually think it's an optimal game plan for a faithful, and I do think he's by far the most likely faithful to avoid banishment and murder. But yeah, that's just my theory. Let me know what you think.
Thank you for that voice message, Zypker, Angus. And yeah, I that makes sense to me that maybe Joe is going to do really well because he seems to not know what's going on. I mean, they all don't really know what's going on, but yeah, he's thrown out Tom. He's completely wrong with it. Maybe the traitors, like I said, will quite like that and keep him around. Do you agree, MaJiKer, that Comedy Joe, might do quite well because of his nature?
Yeah, could do. There is always a spot for the clueless faithful.
Hmm.
The thing is, we've seen in certain conversations he's not that clueless, and he does seem to be playing the game. He's a
Mm.
fascinating one in terms of the celebrity armor as well, because he, as we've said in the intro podcast, he does play a kind of character like this surreal, absolutely stupid, but also like, very, very, very odd personality that the character known as Joe Wilkinson, and that has definitely softened, and he is playing it a little bit more like himself.
Hmm.
But to see where the lines are going to get blurred, that's going to be the most fascinating thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
Most comedians are incredibly smart. I think he is incredibly smart, and the problem is that I think the traitors might know that, so we can't rule him out as like a bumbling fool who doesn't know what's going on. Everybody who knows him or who knows these kind of comedians know that they might be a funny little goose on the surface, but the legs are going underneath. Like there's a real fierce intelligence there.
Yes, I agree. Now, there are other comments on the YouTube video for the first episode, so you can see what people are thinking so far. I've been responding to as many as I can this morning, so definitely go and check that out. Listeners and MaJiKer, remember, we have been playing the Trade Our Traitor this whole time. We may still be playing right now. Before we conduct our own banishment and reveal what we have been dishonest about, Matthew, tell us, where can we find you online? Where can people follow you?
I am on Instagram, magica underscore, and my website is magica.com.
And to make sure you're up to date with the podcast and Traitors news and updates, and occasionally a little video from me, you can follow on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Trader Podcast. And Instagram have changed the rules, meaning that I can't go live anymore without at least 1,000 followers, and we're at about 770 or so. So I'm endeavoring to reach that goal. So please follow us on Instagram and encourage other people to do so if they're fans of the Traitors or if they're not fans of the Traitors. And you can send me your questions on those platforms, DM me, leave comments. You can email me at thetradarpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave a voice message like James and Angus have done at memo.fm/thetradarpodcast, and we'll hear you on the podcast next time, maybe. It's also really helpful to subscribe, leave a lovely review, a nice star rating on whatever platform you're using, and you can support the pod and show off your love for the Traitors and the podcast by acquiring some podcast merch at thetradar.redbubble.com. So you could have a lovely t-shirt like me or a nice mug like me. And if you don't really want to do that, but you want to put in something to help the podcast keep going, because it does cost money to have all the software and the technical equipment that I need, you could visit coffee.com. That's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley, and you can put in a donation of any amount that you want, and you don't need to subscribe to anything. Finally, I think I actually said everything. That's why there's so many things. Oh, there's one more thing. There is a podcast survey that Acast, that's the platform that I use to distribute the pod. They have a survey for listeners to try and figure out how best to help the podcast reach other people, I think. There is a link to this little survey in the episode description. Lots of listeners have already joined in and given some. I won't see your responses, so you can be brutally honest about the podcast. It just asks things like, what platform do you use to listen to? I think. What other kind of podcasts do you like? What are your interests? That sort of thing. Now it is time for our own banishment as we conclude the Trade Our Traitor. Matthew, I've introduced this new mechanic to help decide which one of us guesses the other's lie first. I have my shield. I'm going to hide it in one. It's very high tech, this.
Mhm.
Uh, Matthew, am I holding my shield in this hand or this hand? You're going to pick.
In your left hand.
My left hand.
Hmm.
Haha! I've betrayed you. It was in the right hand. What skill of mine. That means I get to choose. I am going to guess your lie first. I'm so confident. I think I could. Well, I'm not really. I think you've been very sneaky, Matthew, and you've dropped lots of little things here and there throughout this pod that may or may not have been true to throw me off. You mentioned Tom Daly knitting a Gucci dress. You mentioned Comedy Joe being banned from the park for chasing a squirrel. You said that Lucy was born in Cornwall. How unexpected because of her accent. You talked about Paloma's role in Pennyworth. Could be any of these things. Which one do I think was a lie? Maybe they're all true. Maybe I'm wrong about all of it. You talked about some hosts from other seasons, but I believe those. I think you've mentioned those before, or one of them anyway. I think that Tom didn't know. Tom, no, he probably would knit a Gucci. Oh, uh, he, you, Paloma of Faith was in Pennyworth, but she didn't play a psychopathic killer. That is your lie.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Okay, well, I did trick you, so that was correct. And obviously, I deliberately dropped in lots of silly little factoids. Although I must say, we say that AI is going to take all our jobs. The amount of times this morning I asked ChatGPT, give me funny, quirky, unusual facts about the cast of Celebrity Traitors, and it was like, when they were filming, Alan said it was quite difficult. I'm like, that's not funny or quirky or interesting or a fact. And I kept on doing it. It was like, give me more. It said, Paloma Faith is a singer. I was like, this is rubbish. ChatGPT,
Yeah.
you're fired. Anyway, so I did
Boo.
my own research. So everything I said was true. Tom Daly did knit a recreation of a
Oh,
Gucci
man.
dress. And Lucy Beaumont was born in Cornwall. Paloma Faith did play a murdering sociopath. Um, But what I was very sneaky because Joe Wilkinson was banned from his local duck pond for chasing ducks with a sausage roll, not a squirrel. And the warden said to him he was a menace to wildlife.
For goodness sake. I Now that might have seemed like an obvious bad listeners are probably going, Matthew, of course that was wrong. But I thought it was so mad that it probably
Yes.
was. I can imagine some like crazy newspaper headline, Joe Wilkinson banned for chasing squirrels with a sausage. I thought that's why MaJiKer's put it in there because it's so nuts. But yeah, I guess it was a sort of double bluff, and yeah, you changed the details. Okay.
You changed the
Well,
detail. And I also
Matthew,
didn't drop in yeah, I'm just such a great liar. I also didn't drop in a couple of other facts that at one point Claire Balding thought that she'd lost 90% of her hearing only to have her ears vacuumed and then realized she had perfectly average hearing. And also that Charlotte Church was once a fan came backstage in New York and once told her, which is a very touching story, that apparently her music had cured his brain cancer. Now, I would
oh,
s- I would suggest, please, if you have any concerns, do go to a medical professional. But it doesn't do any harm to listen to Charlotte Church's music.
to listen. Yeah, well, why not? There we go. Matthew, you have betrayed me, but have I betrayed you? Do you have any suspicions about what I may have lied about today?
I am not confident with this at all. I feel like you've just recapped the episode. You've hardly said anything that wasn't to do with the actual episode. So I'm just going to go with it. It's got it down to two. It's either that when you were correcting Stephen Fry's quote, actually Stephen Fry, who is a genius and has, as he said, a sticky memory, might have got it right and you just made it up. Um, or that the glasses you got, I feel like you have got some glasses from your former job working on The Masked Singer, though. Um, I feel like I've seen them. Hmm. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with the glasses that you didn't get. Glasses that you think might be Jonathan Ross's from your job on Masked Singer.
I can reveal that, in fact, I have here with me nothing because you're correct. I
No
lied
way.
about the comedy glasses. I didn't steal
No
them from the
way.
Masked Singer. Well done. You've caught me
Wow.
out.
Okay, well, look, this is revenge.
I
This
was
is
so
revenge.
close to tricking you with the Stephen Fry quote. I was like,
Yeah.
go for that one, go for that one. Yeah.
Look, this is revenge for what happened when we played the Traitors live experience. Finally, I'm going to put that to bed because I, in some way, can betray you the way that you betrayed me.
Yeah, I guess this is payback. Well done. You've caught me out. Um, Congratulations, I suppose. I've been banished. You're
Yeah.
successful. You caught a traitor.
Hmm.
Matthew, thank you for joining me on the pod again. It's always wonderful to have you and hope you've enjoyed recapping episode 2 with me today.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thanks so much. And enjoy the rest of the season, guys, because this is going to get really fun.
Can't wait. Thank you, listeners. I will be back with coverage of the next episode with another guest co-host. Until then, my new catchphrase, Matthew, is Laters, traitors.